I'd like to welcome all of our guests. We have no visiting Rotarians, to my knowledge. Thank you, ma'am. And all of our members. We are so glad you are here. I would ask at this time you silence your cell phones. And just a reminder that our Rotary theme this year is Create Hope in the World. And I think we all have a very small part in creating hope in anyone's world that we encounter. Janice, would you like to lead us in song?
Sure. So today we're going to sing Abraham Lincoln's very favorite song. Do you know what that is?
Dixie. Dixie.
What Dixie was one of them, but the most we don't talk about Dixie, but his really most famous song that he loved and always asked for it to be played at all of his events.
It was a Taylor Swift song, wasn't it?
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, written by Julia Ward Howe, and every opportunity that he had, he requested that song, and it came to her in a dream, and she wrote it in one night. It is to the tune of John Brown's Body, and I won't tell you those words because those are kind of, I learned that in grade school. It was something else. Okay, so here we go. Here's your pitch. Let's see. Mine eyes ready, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I know you know the chorus. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I'll put the words on the table the next time.
Thank you, Janice. I realize I am at a very big disadvantage. I'm going to have to start getting you the words the week before so I can practice when I'm standing up here so I don't look silly. Pledge, Michael?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And visitors and guests, Dick Hinton, y'all can be seated. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I did it again. I'm sorry. Hold up. I skipped it again. No glasses. Stand back up. We got to pray. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Lorna. I'm messing up your video. Sam Carey, would you lead us in our invocation?
Let us pray. Loving Father, thank you for watching over us and guiding us. Give us strength to help those in need today, and help us as a club to help those in need in our community. Bless us food and nourishment in our body, and us to thy faithful servant. We ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated now. We have some guests today. David Loon has... David, who are your guests?
I've got, well, the speaker, of course, but I've got my brother, Parker Loon. He's an anesthesiologist, and along with Jim Burns, who I saw sneak in here, is one of the graduates of Georgia. So he's very special, or very interested in hearing the speaker. And then I have Daniel Green, who is at UBS, and he's the one who actually originally introduced me to Dr. Blake.
Good.
He was a former student of Dr. Black. So
Glad to have you. And we have one other one, Bernard Pfeiffer, Steve Copman's guest.
This is Bernard. I've been trying for 2 years to get Bernard to come to Rotary. And I thought if it was going to take 2 years, the speaker that we have today will be worth the wait. He's amazing. So Bernard, I found out today was a chemical engineer. I knew he bought and sold property, so we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Service updates, mobile meals, I actually delivered today, and everyone was in great form, healthy, happy. We actually had one lady that we've not had on our route a whole horribly long. She was added due to an injury. She broke her hip and broke her wrist, and she's been in 90 years old. And she told me today that she has graduated her therapy and is no longer in need of meals. So I think today was going to be our last delivery day, but it's good to hear wonderful news like that from them. Announcements today, reminder that this is the last week for this quarter's nominations for Business of the Quarter. If you have a nomination, please try, there's forms on the desk if you don't have the email, but please try to get those submitted by end of day, at least over the weekend if you can. We do have several nominations, and the committee that's going to look at those will start looking at them next week. Okay? Our first board meeting for 23-24 is going to be Wednesday, the 26th. All are invited. It's held at 4:30 at the Trust Company, and if you'd like to join us, you can hear what the board's doing. However, if you can't make it, the following Friday, the 28th, next week, is our first monthly club assembly. And what that means is that Paul will be sharing the hopefully approved budget with everyone. So you'll kind of know where those funds are going that we raise every year, as well as just operating funds and what that looks like. And then you'll also hear from the chair people, membership committee, foundation. What are they looking to do this year? How are we looking to make our mark this year, just like we have in years past, okay? Following that short business meeting, which won't be long, Lorna is going to lead you all in some fun and fellowship. I unfortunately will not be here. It was a pre-planned trip. So Lorna's going to lead us through the club assembly, which she's very prepared to do, but then she's got some fun fellowship stuff to do toward the end. Pack the Park. Who can tell me when Pack the Park is?
August 15th.
Thank you. Thank you. August 15th, it's a Tuesday night. Tickets are $14. That comes with your ticket, a $6 voucher toward food. If you don't use the ticket that night, you can still use it throughout the season. You just won't get the food voucher. But out of that $14, $6.50 is going to go to Polio Plus, and the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates Foundation, is 2-to-1 matching that, which becomes a $19.50 donation toward Polio Plus. I got an email, and I don't know if everybody got it. It didn't look like it, but I wanted to share. John Downs, which is our End Polio Now District chairperson, sent an email this week that as of July 12th of this year, there are only 6 confirmed cases worldwide of polio. 5 are Afghanistan, and 1 is Pakistan. This time last year, to kind of look at it year to year, we were at 13 cases. So it's way down. Halfway there, hopefully. Lorna, would you like to share a fundraising update?
Yes. So on your tables, there's save the dates. We're doing more than one fundraiser this year. Look at them, put them in your calendar because I need your support. But also I'm looking for sponsorship. So if you know Randy Boy or Jim Haslam, please come see me because I don't want to cold call people. We're looking definitely corporate, but it'll be fun. We're honoring our members and raising money at the same time.
Thank you. Rosa, would you like to speak to us about the foundation?
Well, for one thing, the tickets, we've sold 92, so I need 8 more to make 100, but more importantly, we've already collected almost $1,300, which is really great. The other thing is, yes ma'am? I'll take them. Oh, you'll take them? All right, thank you. The other thing is, lots of you know that I'm a big advocate for Heart to Heart. Heart to Heart is that annual program that we do with Mexico and the Mexican Rotary clubs. And the annual trip is already been planned. It's the notice went out from Tom Ducey. It's going to be November the 8th through November the 15th. We're going to visit several new projects that we've been supporting. And the other important thing is that it's all going to be in Mexico City. We'll be staying in 2 different hotels so that we can avoid the mad traffic rush that always occurs. So it's going to be a really good trip, and we've planned a day of, we're going to go visit the pyramids and Teotihuacan, and so I think it'll be really interesting. I know we've had 2, Roy is gone, and Dick Hinton have been, they both have been on it, and they both really enjoyed it. I've been on it at least 4 times, So I hope you can join us. If you need to get a copy of the email invitation, let me know and I'll make sure I'll forward it to you.
Thank you. Ray Fisher has an update he'd like to share.
Yeah, last Friday when I heard Tom was going home, I went over there at about 6 o'clock. He came, answered the door, looked great. I mean, I sat there and talked, maybe 30, 45 minutes, didn't want to stay long, but I mean, his speech is doing good. He looks good. He looks healthy. If he gets to talking too much about what was going on, he'll get a little off a little bit, but I mean, man, he looks great. I mean, I'm just tickled to death to see him. I mean, like I said, when he answered the door, I thought, well, a couple of weeks ago we may not, know if we're going to see him. He's doing great, looks great.
And just to follow that up, I sent an email yesterday for the lunch suggestions. Tom actually emailed me back and said he couldn't wait to get back to see all of our faces, and he looked forward to being here. So thank you, Ray, for that. Birthdays. Y'all are going to be sad. Ashley Wyatt is the only birthday, July 23rd, and he's not here, so we don't get to sing.
Got any present for him?
Yeah, got the present for him, okay? Birthday's coming whether he's here or not, but.
And they've been practicing in four-part harmony.
Yeah. All right, next week there's some coming up, so Lord will be ready for you. David, would you like to come and introduce our speaker?
Very excited about our speaker today. Dr. Harold Black is the emeritus, professor, emeritus, thank you. There's a lot of these words that I've never thought about saying beforehand, and I probably should have. Professor of Finance at the University of Tennessee. His undergraduate degree is from the University of Georgia, whose Terry College of Business, there he goes, gloating. Jim's very excited. Whose Terry College of Business has announced a named professorship in his honor. In addition, UGA is naming one of its new freshman dormitories for him and two others who integrated its freshman class in 1962. He earned his PhD from the University of Ohio State. We're going down a whole line of schools I don't like. His faculty appointment, and there it comes again, University of Florida. Howard, I like Howard. And the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He was appointed by the President Carter to serve on the first National Credit Union Administration Board. He has been a visiting scholar at the Federal Reserve and at the Congressional Budget Office, and has served as chairman of the Nashville branch of the Federal Reserve of Atlanta and on the boards of two of the nation's largest financial institutions. He has been published extensively in leading journals in business and economics, and his consulting clients are among the country's leading law firms, which ours, I guess, will consult with you, and financial institutions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Black.
Most of that was true. How long do I have?
15, 20 minutes.
Okay, I can do that easily. Just stop me, because I don't wear a watch. I don't like the tan line. I thought it was funny. Somebody asked me what I was going to talk about, and my answer is I have no idea. Because I never know what I'm going to talk about until I stand up and start speaking. But I will say one thing. If you had sang Dixie, you would have had the shortest tenure of any speaker ever. When I went to University of Georgia, people say, why did you go to Georgia? And I always tell them I wasn't smart enough to go to Purdue. My brother was at Purdue. I wanted to go to Purdue. But my junior year, the university was ordered to admit their first two black students, who were both initially rejected as being not qualified. They had applied their senior year in high school. They both went to Turner High in Atlanta, my high school, biggest rival. And so they went off to other colleges, kept the suit going. When they were finally admitted, they were actually in their senior years. And the court ordered them admitted that January, since Georgia had a 2-year residency requirement. We thought they weren't going to go, but they showed up at the university. Well, when they showed up, something happened. My brother was going to Purdue because he couldn't go to Georgia Tech. And back in those days, they had a rule. and they said that if you want to major in something not offered at the 3 black state schools, the state would pay your tuition to leave the state. And so since my brother wanted to be an engineer, couldn't go to Georgia Tech, he went to Purdue. I was going to go to Purdue too, but because of that court decision, the state legislature, which at that time was all white, took away those tuition grants to over 700 black students, including my brother. So my father broke my heart. He sat me down and he said, because back in those days, they didn't give all of these wonderful scholarships to smart black kids. So Dad sat me down and he said, I'm sorry, you can't go to Purdue. You got to find someplace else to go. So I ended up at the University of Georgia, and I always thought it was ironic that they gave the scholarships to keep you out of state. And so when they got really mad, they took away the scholarships because you could go, but they didn't want you to go, and I showed up. So I show up, and I have 5 band scholarships. I was a #1 rated clarinet player in our all-black group in the Southeast for 2 solid years, in the best high school band ever put together in the whole wide world. I'm saying that because our band director was a Blue Note recording artist, and if you know jazz, he was the lead trumpeter for the Horace Silver Sextet, and he left the road to become our band director. And so when I entered high school in the 8th grade, we had 5-year high school, I was one of 3 8th graders in the varsity band. So when I went to the University of Georgia, I tried out for the then called Dixie Redcoat Marching Band. They played Dixie. My father said, you sure you want to try out for that band? You going to play Dixie? I said, I don't care. I just want to be in the band. So I tried out. The band director, Roger Dance, said, you're really very good. I said, I know it. He said, but you cannot be in my band. So I wasn't in the band. Okay, so I'm going to go to the football games. Hamilton, who's there, remember he was not qualified? Hamilton graduated Phi Beta Kappa in chemistry, didn't make a grade under an A, mostly A pluses, became the first black at Emory's Medical School, became chief of orthopedic surgery. Just think of what he would have done had he been qualified. So Hamilton sits me down and he says, Harold, he said, this is not like the regular college experience. Now, he lived off campus. I lived on campus. That's another story. So he said, go slow. Hell with that. I went to every football game. And so the first football game I show up, this is because of Dixie, right? They play the national anthem. Then they play, oh, and by the way, the Georgia football games looked like a Ku Klux Klan rally. Everybody had a Confederate flag. Everybody but me, of course. And so they're waving all these Confederate flags. I'm the only black person in the stadium, you know, who isn't carrying a mop. There's a student section. I sit down when they play Dixie, and all hell comes down on top of my head. They start throwing things and cursing. And if you know the Georgia history, Dean Tate, who they named the Tate Center after, was the only administrator who wasn't really basically openly opposed to our being there. And it was like, you know, beam me up, Scotty. He materialized out of the thin air right behind me, grabbing student IDs. And in those days, you couldn't do anything on that campus without your ID card. And so he started grabbing IDs, and everybody stopped harassing me. And at every single football game my freshman year, I'd sit down when they played Dixie, and for the first couple of games, all of this stuff happened. He showed up grabbing ID cards. And so by the end of the season, everybody looked around. Nobody was going to say a word. I could sit down all I wanted to. And if somebody said something like, everybody around would go, shut up, fool! Because they knew that Dean Tate was going to show up and start grabbing IDs. All right, so that's my Dixie story.
What year was this?
1962. By the way, there is now David mentioned this. There is now a Harold A. Black Professor of Economics at the University of Georgia. Georgia decides that it wants to have a named professorship. And so, you know how things are. They came to me and they said, we want to name a professorship after you, for you, give us $1 million. No, they didn't say that. But, you know, that's what happens. I was a James F. Smith Professor of Business at UT, and his bank, then First American Bank, gave UT a significant amount of money to endow a chair in his name. And so the university just simply said, we'll raise the money in 2 days, or however long it was. They called their big donors. They got the money, and so now there's a professor down there who sits in the Harold A. Black Professorship. I was pretty proud of that, and as pointed out, this past March, the university decided to put my name, along with that of Kerry Russian Miller and Mary Blackwell Diallo. We were 3 of the 4 first freshmen at the university on the new Black Diallo Miller Hall. And that was a wonderful, wonderful ceremony, but I really don't want to talk about that. Here's what I want to talk about. This week, the university is hosting the DEI officials from the SEC. Now, full disclosure, UT's vice president for, they call it diversity and engagement, Ty Small, is a wonderful person. He is one of my best friends. And if you should invite him to come talk to you. Let him tell you what they do at UT. I think he runs that department like it should be. And I know that the right-wing press really does badmouth DEI because they say that it's not inclusion, it's exclusion and all that sort of stuff. I'll let you make up your own minds. What I do is I look at evidence from both sides and make up my own mind. And in some cases, what they say is true, but in many cases, it's not true. But Tybee asked me to say a few words to these people. Well, the person before me stood up and bemoaned the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action, saying that it would adversely impact DEI recruitment and placement of black students on college campuses. I stood up and I said, I want to tell you about Harold Black's first law. Harold Black's first law is that any law worth being circumvented will be. And I said, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a constitutional expert. But it seems to me that of the 42 different ways that you can choose to put a person on your college campus, I just made up the number 42, that Supreme Court has only said that one is unconstitutional, and that is race. I told them, if your admissions officers can't figure out how to continue what it's doing by not using race, but using the other 41 items, then you ought to fire them and get somebody in who can. And I mean that. Because look, the only reason that you have an admissions office is for one reason only. And what's that? It's to discriminate. Right? That's it. Because if you didn't, you would just accept everybody who applied. So let me tell you about the use of admissions offices. Yeah. I'm an academic, but I'm also intellectually curious, and I wish more people were. So I said, well, why do we have admissions offices if not to discriminate? So I go back in history and find out that the first 2 admissions offices were at Harvard and Columbia, and they were set up to discriminate against Jews. Jews were comprising such a large proportion of their admissions that they put in place admissions offices to lessen the number of Jews, and sure it happened. because they started this at the turn of the 1900s. By the 1920s, they had reduced the number of Jews in both places by half. Okay? Now, Harvard, and they may have told you, I was on the UNC Chapel Hill faculty. I think they were basically stupid. And I actually think that, black folks who are condemning the suit, I thought that they should have been filing amicus briefs with the Asian Americans, because the Asian Americans, a traditionally oppressed minority in this country. California had a set of anti-Chinese laws that were every bit as odorous as the Jim Crow laws of the Deep South. And yet they've overcome that. I used to say when I was growing up, I grew up in a totally, completely segregated environment in Atlanta. My father planned that. Dad was principal of the black elementary school in Madison, Georgia. Had a fairly ugly racial incident that happened to him. And if he had not been who he was, he would have landed in jail. He came home, told my mother, I'm not raising my boys in this town. So they moved from Madison, Georgia to Atlanta, in the southwest Atlanta, which was 150,000 all black folks. And I never talked to a white person before I went to the University of Georgia. Mission accomplished. Oh, by the way, I guess I should tell this story. So when I applied to Georgia, they have on the application form a picture, race, as if they didn't know your color if you went to Booker T. Washington High in Atlanta. And you had to have a letter of recommendation from a Georgia graduate. They figured not many black folks knew folks that graduated from Georgia. And you had to have a personal interview. So after I went through all this stuff, they sent me a thing that said, fine, you have to have a personal interview, and it's going to be held at O'Keefe High School last week. I'm serious. The letter was postmarked a week after I was supposed to have the interview, which meant I had to go to Athens. And I go to Athens, and I get interviewed by the most racist human being I've ever met in my life, the registrar. And he was the point person for interviewing black folks. When Hamilton showed up, he said that Hamilton should be rejected because his answers were evasive. He asked Hamilton how long had he been frequenting houses of prostitution. Charlene Hunter Galt, who was also rejected among the first two, who has 3 Pulitzer Prizes. She wasn't qualified either. She was asked if her mother was a prostitute. So I show up with my father. Now, understand, I'm 16 years old. He doesn't ask me about prostitution. I guess he said, I don't know if 16-year-olds who are 5'2" go to houses of prostitution. So he didn't ask me that. But in the normal conversation, we didn't get out to a good start. He didn't say, welcome to Athens. He didn't shake our hands. He didn't ask us to sit down. He said, why do you want to come here? Because we don't want you here. And of course, my reply was, that's why I want to come. He didn't like that. And so in the normal conversation, he uses the N word. I've never seen my father mad except at me. And so Dad pulls me out of the chair, says, let's go. Registrar said, I didn't give you permission to leave my office. And my dad, who I'd never heard curse, said something like, you, sir, go to hell. And we walk out, we get in the car, we're driving back to Atlanta. Dad looks at me and he says, that didn't go very well. And to this day, we can't figure out why 2 weeks later, the postman knocks on the door, hands me an envelope, and I can show you the picture of it on my phone. It says, congratulations, inside is your admission to the University of Georgia. It was a regular white envelope with a red and black banner. And to this day, well, my mother had a theory. We couldn't figure out why I went to University of Georgia, but I can tell you one thing. Affirmative action, this is a pun, I guess, colors blacks who are there. When I go to Georgia, they tell themselves, the only reason he's here is because the courts ordered him here. Right? That because the university says he's not qualified, the only way he should be going to some other school. Shouldn't be coming here because he's obviously not qualified. He ought to go to UT. So my attitude was, when I walked into class, to see if there was anybody in the room smarter than me. And sometimes there might have been. But you know, I came out of a house in which my brother was a math genius. My brother thought he discovered the central limit theorem, and he was really, really, really disappointed to find out that, you know, that had been around for 500 years. His daughter, who was dean of the School of Engineering at the University of Iowa, with a PhD in math and in engineering from Michigan, used to say that when her math skills make mine look like kindergarten and my skills make most everybody else look like second grade, right? And she would say, you know, when I ran into an intractable problem, I called Dad and he'd tell me the answer. My brother was such that he had great teachers because they never asked him for his work, because if they asked him for his work, it would have confused him. Because, you know, there was never any work, there was no need to have any work. Right? I mean, he never did homework. He didn't have to. Right? Because he knew all the answers. He could figure it out. But like I said, so I come out of that house and I go to Georgia and they think that the only reason I'm there is because of affirmative action. I read the same thing when they talk about, when the folks on the left talk about Clarence Thomas. Well, it's obvious to me that Clarence Thomas wasn't an affirmative action hire or appointment as the Supreme Court. But I could argue that there are two affirmative action Supreme Court justices. One is the latest one, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and the other one definitely is Sotomayor, who, if you, once again, you're the attorney, but when I read their dissents, I consider them an embarrassment. And I'll tell you why. I read the dissents like I read the dissents on affirmative action, and Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent talked about the relative difference in mortality survival rates between infants who have black doctors and infants who have white doctors. It turns out, for statistical reasons, if you know anything about ordinary least squares or logistic regression analysis, you know that the study she cited has been critiqued as using an incorrect statistical technique. But that's beside the point. Even, in my opinion, and like I said, I'm not an attorney, even if she's correct, she says we ought to keep this affirmative action in place so that we can have this particular result. My understanding is that even if she were correct, and Sotomayor makes the same sorts of comments, even if they both were correct, that still should have been a 9-0 decision. And the reason it should have been is because what they're talking about is not whether it was constitutional or not. They're talking about an effect, right? They're not talking about whether it's the issue is, was it constitutional? Not whether the effect is this or the effect is that. They're supposed to be ruling on the constitutionality of what comes before them. And it seems to me that the dissents that I looked at had absolutely nothing to do with the law. Because let us suppose that what they say is right. Okay, let's say that if you have affirmative action, that everything that they wrote about all of these effects happen to be correct. Then you just have a constitutional amendment. And then it'll be constitutional. That's my view of the world. Okay? So now, what the left immediately is going after now, or legacy admits. They say, you admit a person because they're so Jim Haslam's great-great-great-great-great grandchild applies to UT. They don't even have to submit any credentials at all except for the last name, right? We walk in the door. Jim Haslam's giving UT all the millions of dollars. How do I feel about legacy? Let them in if they're going to give me $1 million more. That's the way I feel. But if you say that you should not, and Wesleyan College came out and said we're getting away with legacy appointments, well, lots of luck. Because if I'm a Wesleyan graduate and I'm thinking about giving them money and they're not going to take my kid, I'm going to find someplace else to give my money to. And anyway, wouldn't you think that legacy kids would sort of ordinarily meet the criteria for coming to the school? They probably went to the best prep schools, right? They probably, unless it's been bred out of them, are pretty smart. And so you would normally admit them. But admissions is a really interesting thing. I'll ask you, what criteria should be used to admit students, let's say, to Harvard? Well, most people would say GPAs and SATs and all that sort of stuff, right? Okay, 67,000 applications for 2,000 slots. Harvard says we could fill those 2,000 slots with students that have GPAs above 4 and SAT scores of at least above 1,530 out of 1,600 and still have 5,000 people that meet that criteria that we have to reject. Think about that. So how do you pick the 2,000? I mean, you might as well tell the other, right, 57,000 don't even apply. We're only going to take this number. And then you say, well, let's just have a lottery. Okay? Well, you see, here's the issue. Is that if you have a 4.0 from Phillips or Andover, that's probably stronger than a 4.0 from Bearden or Austin East or Farragut. Okay, well, what about SATs, ACTs? They are culture bound. And that's been demonstrated time and time again. When I came out of high school, my group had higher math scores than we had English scores. Because the liberal arts section was like taking a tour through Afghanistan. We hadn't heard of hardly any of that stuff. Okay? But at least we could do the math. Because math wasn't culture bound, even though they're now talking about woke math. Have you seen that nonsense? The only thing I can say about woke math is I bet the astronauts are really happy that those women that did the figures, right, the black women, didn't do woke math. They'll probably still be on the way to Jupiter.
Hey, Dr. Black, we
Sorry.
probably need to move on to questions.
All right, questions. I'm done.
Oh,
I'm through. I mean, see, I can stop any old time. Yes.
Dr. Black?
Yes, sir.
On the affirmative action, one of the cases that came about that brought it to the Supreme Court was a white female student that was from a wealthy family. She had scored really high on the ACT, and she got rejected from a college. And I argued with some of my friends. My friends were like, well, you know, she scored really high. And I said, well, you know, here's the problem. And I kind of had mixed views, but affirmative action gives the opportunity to minorities, but it also kind of helped with poor people. This young lady, her parents had money, and my argument was her parents got the wealth to move her to any school in the country, anywhere other than where she wanted to go. And on the basis of admission, the argument to them was, even if they struck down affirmative action, I think the key element that needs to be looked at is the parents' wealth and income, and you can actually incorporate the minorities and all races if that is actually added to the admission criteria.
Now, the problem with that is that given the same levels of income, black wealth is about 4.5, 5 times less that of white wealth. Here's the reason why. Americans store their wealth historically in their house. And home ownership among minorities is almost 1/10 of that of whites. And so even at the same level of income, you will have widely different levels of wealth. And so you can't use wealth as a criteria. You see, look, here's one of the things about all of this. It is hard to tell a priori how well a student's going to do at any university. Then the only way to tell is admit that student and see what happens. Okay? And so the best example I can give you is this. When I was chairman of the finance department at UT, I'm ex officio in the PhD admissions committee, and we're sitting there, and there is this one applicant that has the absolute lowest GMATs we've seen ever, who's got mediocre grades. And everyone votes against him, and I tell them, thank you for your advice, but we're taking him. Why were we going to take him? Well, he was a third-string team All-American basketball player, and we needed help on our faculty team. No. The reason we took him was that he was currently working as a research analyst at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington. And I picked up the phone and called one of my co-authors who was in that division, and I said, tell me about this person. And he said, he is one of the hardest working, most intuitive people that we have. He knows exactly what a PhD program is going to be like. And by the way, even if he flunks out, you won't have to train him as a research analyst because he'll already have those skills. So he can hit the ground running, and you can keep him for 2 years and then cut him, let him go. Say, okay, it sounds good to me. He was a black guy. So over the objections of the faculty, we took him. We also took a person who had among the highest GMATs we'd ever seen and the strongest grades. And that person flunked out. And our affirmative action hire has a PhD and is a tenured full professor at a very good school. And one of the people that argued most vehemently against his being there came to me and apologized when he had his micro theory course in econometrics. And he said, I was wrong. So how do you know who to take? Yes, ma'am. I'm done.
I don't know what adjective to use to describe you.
Please don't.
Except amazingly fascinating.
Oh,
That
thank
was amazing. Thank you for being here. Hold on just 1 second. Got a couple things for you.
A coloring book.
So each week, we donate a book to the Pond Gap Elementary School Library in honor of our speaker, and we just ask that you sign the label. This week's book is I Am Every Good Thing. And I think that's very fitting.
Okay, I think that's right. You knew, I knew it wasn't going to say something like, you know, queer theory or whatever.
And this is a token of our appreciation. Thank you for being here. Another round for Dr. All right. Parker, if you'll stand. Daniel, if you'll stand, and Mr. Pfeiffer, if you'll stand. Could we give our guests another round of applause for being here? Thank you. All right, Lorna's trivia draw. You want me to draw?
Yeah, you're not part of it.
Okay. All right, so just a reminder, this is the Art Pickle raffle, right? The month of July, these are free to every person sitting in the room. Starting August, this becomes part of Lorna's fundraising for the following year, so there's still going to be some great prizes every week that she's going to give off. But you're going to be purchasing the raffle tickets each week, and she'll tell you more probably at the club assembly about that, okay? So, first, and how many do I have this week? 3 this week. What is our first one?
Bottle of wine.
A bottle of wine. Does everybody in the room have a ticket? Just one ticket. Okay. All right, so first ticket is 465218. Steve Hoffman. All right. Congratulations. All right, second,
Basket with jam and honey.
a basket with, and I'm assuming it's homemade.
No, Castle Creek.
Okay, Castle Creek jelly and honey. And a beautiful basket. All right, ticket is 465219. Oh my gosh, and I did shuffle those. No, I did shuffle them. Roy Diadiker. Yay! And our third and final.
District ceramic with pot with flowers.
Yep, did you hear that? Because I didn't. What was it?
District ceramic pot.
A ceramic pot with wooden flowers.
Yeah.
Right? And
Two different artists.
2 different artists, and Lorna put those together as a gift. All right, ready? 465236. Ryan Messer, yay! All right, weekly Rotary question. I meant to do that. I hope you weren't paying attention to that. All right, so this week's question is, it's 2 parts, and you got to get them both. Raise your hand if you're the first one to know. Who is our 2023 RI president, and where is he or she from? What country? And I know Janice knows, because she's met him. Oh, I just told it was a man. It's a man. Dang it. It's a man. I got to stop. I'm about to tell you the answer. Nobody knows?
He's from Scotland, right? He's outside
Good
right
job.
where my mom was from.
Yes, he is from Scotland. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, since nobody else knows, I'm giving him the winner. Gordon McAnally, and he's from Scotland. Congratulations. This is scratch off lottery tickets.
All right. They already won the $1 billion.
And you gotta donate the polio plus if you win.
There you
That's
go.
the caveat.
And he's a former dentist. Oh, he's a former dentist.
Once a dentist, always a
Yeah,
dentist.
there's no former there. All right, David Loom, would you care to lead us in our 4-way test?
Sure.
Things you think, say, do.
Four-way test. Things you think, say, or do. First.
Is it true?
Second.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third.
Building a better friendship.
And fourth.
All concerned.